I almost died that damned night. The darkness swallowed Interstate 5 like a predator. Driving at night had always given me a strange feeling, something between freedom and fear. The dark asphalt cutting through silent forests, the headlights casting bizarre shadows on the trees, the absolute solitude. But that night, on the desolate stretch between Sacramento, California, and Medford, Oregon, I learned the true meaning of terror. I was driving a box truck carrying medical supplies with a tight deadline for Seattle, Washington. I had made that route a few times before and preferred driving at night to avoid traffic, despite the strange feeling every time. The radio crackled with static between stations, and the only constant sound was the engine's hum and the wind hitting the cabin. It was around 1 a.m. when I stopped at a rest stop on the California-Oregon border. The parking lot was almost empty, just a few trucks parked in the distance. That kind of loneliness that sends chills down your spine. I got out to use the bathroom and stretch my legs. The place was a corpse, vandalized bathrooms, broken lights, and a closed for renovation sign hanging from a crooked pole. The air smelled of damp earth and old gasoline. I decided to relieve myself right there. The air smelled of damp earth and old gasoline. While I was easing my bladder against a wall covered in graffiti, I heard the squeal of tires on gravel. The cold dawn air cut into my skin as I stepped out of the cabin. As I entered the bathroom, I noticed something strange. A dark sedan, maybe an old Toyota or Honda, parked near my truck. The rest of the lot was empty, but that car, it was there, next to mine. I tried to ignore the discomfort and entered the bathroom. The fluorescent lights flickered on the ceiling. I did what I needed, washed my face to shake off the fatigue, and headed back to the truck. But the car was still there. There was no one inside, not around. The silence was suffocating. I climbed into the cabin and locked the doors. I started the engine and drove off, trying to leave the paranoia behind. But something inside me knew that night wasn't over yet. I drove for about 15 minutes when everything started to go wrong. First, the dashboard lights began to flicker. The radio emitted a strange static, as if someone was whispering in the background. Then the headlights went out. I was driving at nearly 60 miles per hour on a deserted highway, with no light except the pale moon above the trees. I froze. My headlights had never failed before. Trying to stay calm, I hit the dashboard, hoping it was just a temporary short circuit. And then, out of nowhere, they came back on. The relief didn't last long. In the rearview mirror, I saw headlights coming up behind me. A car, a dark sedan, the same damn car that was parked next to my truck at the rest stop. My chest tightened. The road was empty. No other cars in sight, just me and that vehicle. I accelerated. It did too. It could be a coincidence. It could be someone going in the same direction. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Then, like a punch in the stomach, a question hit me. How did he know I was having problems with the truck? I remembered the time I spent in the bathroom. The car was parked next to my truck. Someone could have tampered with the wiring while I was gone. My stomach churned. I was being hunted. And the worst was yet to come. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing inside the cabin. The dark sedan wasn't just following me. It was speeding up. The headlights flickered as if it wanted to blind me through the rearview mirror. I floored the gas pedal. The truck roared, but still, the car kept pace, hunting me like a patient predator. The road was a tunnel of darkness, only cut by the white line on the asphalt and the cold headlights behind me. There was no exit, no rest stop, no town, no other cars. Just me, a nearly 10-ton truck, and a psychopath on my tail. That's when something even worse happened. My headlights went out again. This time, they didn't come back on. The horror took over my body. I was blindly driving a metal machine at high speed, not knowing what was ahead. Don't panic, I thought. But how could I not panic? The headlights of the sedan illuminated me from behind, casting my shadow into the cabin. I was completely vulnerable. I gripped the steering wheel tightly and slowed down, hoping my eyes would adjust to the dimness of the road. Slowly, the moonlight revealed the outlines of the lane. I took a deep breath, but then I realized the sedan was passing me. It didn't just want to follow me. It wanted to stop me, The car slid to the left of the truck and, in a sudden move, slammed into me. The impact was deafening. The truck shook, swerved, and I almost went off the road. I managed to hold the steering wheel in time, but the car tried again, harder. The side of the truck scraped against the sedan, sparks flying in the dark, but something froze me to my bones. At that moment, I kept wondering, did he really want to ram his vehicle into my truck? Is he insane? That's when, for the first time, I saw the driver, and he was smiling. An older man, gray hair, and a look of pure macabre delight, as if it were a game. He wanted to see me lose control. He wanted to kill me. Desperation took over. I couldn't brake. If I did, he'd ram the car into the front of the truck. If I tried to swerve, I could flip into the ditch by the side of the road. I needed to be smarter. I gripped the steering wheel tight, pressed my feet on the pedals, and at the exact moment he tried to hit me again, I turned the truck toward him. The impact was brutal. The sedan spun, losing control. I saw it leave the road, flipping down the embankment, disappearing into the darkness. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I floored it without looking back. The truck shook, the body scratched from the impact. My breath was ragged, my whole body trembling. But I was alive. And him? I don't know. I drove straight to Portland, where I found a police station. I reported everything. The car, the crash, the chase. They promised to check the road, but never gave me a definitive answer. No body was found. No car was identified. They later said I was exhausted, that I might have hallucinated. The only thing left was the dent on the side of my truck. But in that sedan, before it flipped, I swear I saw something. The man wasn't wearing a seatbelt. His face hit the windshield, and he kept smiling. I might be losing my mind, but I know what I saw. That smile. That damned smile. Since that night, I've never traveled alone in the middle of the night, and every time I see a dark car parked near mine, I don't get out, because I know that somewhere on those empty roads, there's always an American psychopath waiting to strike. If I had hesitated for one more second, maybe I wouldn't be here to tell this story. It was a hot July night, and I was driving alone down a deserted road in the Texas countryside, trying to find a hotel after a full day on the road. I had left Austin that morning, planning to reach El Paso before dawn, but I had underestimated the fatigue and the loneliness of those back roads. My eyes were heavy. The radio only crackled with static. My phone had been without service for at least half an hour. It was like I was driving through a forgotten patch of the map. That's when I saw what appeared to be a small gas station in the middle of nowhere. A sign flickered with weak, misaligned lights. It was my chance to stretch my legs and maybe get some information about a nearby hotel. I turned the corner and parked. The place looked abandoned, but the door was open. As I stepped inside, I was hit by the rancid smell of cigarettes mixed with grease. Behind the counter, a thin, gaunt-faced man stared at the black and white TV, as if I didn't exist. "Good evening, man. Do you know if there's a hotel around here? My phone's got no signal." My voice sounded strangely loud in the heavy silence of the place. The man took a moment to turn his head. His eyes were deep-set and expressionless. "There's nothing around here, just the road." A chill ran down my neck. Something about the way he spoke unsettled me. Before I could ask anything else, I noticed something on the shelf next to the counter, an old, crumpled road map. I grabbed it without hesitation and threw a $5 bill on the counter. "Thanks. Keep the change." I left without looking back and headed back to my car. When I slammed the door, I felt a strange relief, as if I had escaped something I didn't even understand. But the worst was yet to come. I took a back road, hoping it would lead me back to the main highway. The asphalt was rough, with tall grass on both sides. The only sound was the engine of my car cutting through that absolute emptiness. Then I saw something ahead, two silhouettes standing in the middle of the road. My fingers gripped the steering wheel. The headlights revealed two men standing side by side, motionless. No uniforms, no flashlights, no car nearby, just two strangers blocking the way. I slowed down, hoping they would move. But they didn't. My heart started racing. Something was wrong. Very wrong. My stomach turned. Those men weren't moving. They just watched me under the headlights, their faces hidden in the shadows. My instinct screamed for me not to stop. But if I kept going, I could run them over. And what if they were just two drunk guys or lost farmers? Slowly, I began to reduce my speed until I was just a few meters away from them. My chest rose and fell with short, uncontrollable breaths. I rolled down the window slightly. Mistake. Hey, are you guys okay? No response. No movement. They just stared. The silence became deafening. Then, suddenly, they started to walk, but not together. One came straight toward me. The other veered off, disappearing to the side of the car. Every fiber of my body screamed, danger. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and floored the accelerator, feeling the adrenaline surge inside me. The man coming toward me sprinted in my direction, but I was already far enough. Then, in a swift motion, I jerked the wheel to the left and tried to spin the car. That's when I saw it. The second man, the one who had disappeared to the side, was holding something large and dark in his hands. A spike strip. My eyes widened. Time slowed down. If I hadn't accelerated a second earlier, he would have managed to throw it under my tires, leaving me completely vulnerable. But he missed. The object hit the asphalt, slid, and went off the road. I accelerated like a maniac, feeling my muscles tense up from pure fear. Through the rearview mirror, I saw one of them standing in the middle of the road, watching me. The other was already vanishing into the darkness. My whole body was shaking. I hit the main road at full speed, not looking to the sides. My phone still had no signal. I didn't know if they were following me, if they had written down my plate, if I would be able to find help in time. For 15 minutes, I was a dead man driving a ghost car. When the signal finally came back, I called the police. The dispatcher listened carefully and said they would send a patrol car to check it out. But deep down, I knew the truth. They wouldn't find anyone. That night, I locked myself in a roadside motel and sat on the floor, my back to the door, holding my knee to my chest, trying to convince myself that it was over. But it wasn't over. To this day, I can't drive at night without feeling my heart race. Every silhouette by the side of the road feels like a ghost from the past. Every headlight approaching in the rearview mirror brings me back to that freezing fear. And every time I pass a deserted road, I wonder, what if I hadn't escaped? The silence of the road had always reassured me, or at least that's what I thought before that night. I was driving across the United States, traveling from Denver to Portland, crossing those endless highways that seemed to swallow time. It was late, almost 1 a.m., and I could already feel the fatigue building up in every muscle of my body. My plan was to find a cheap motel in the next town, but the GPS had stopped working, and my phone had no signal. The last town I passed was at least an hour away. I felt alone in the world, surrounded by the darkness of rural Oregon. The radio only crackled with static, and besides the sound of the engine, everything around me was one big emptiness. That's when I saw the gas station. The sign flickered irregularly as if the electricity was failing. It was one of those old stations in the middle of nowhere, with a single pump and a dimly lit convenience store. There were no cars around. I stopped and got out of the car. The air was cold and damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth. The feeling of isolation was suffocating. The only light came from inside the store, where a tired-looking man was behind the counter, flipping through a magazine. "Good evening," he said, not taking his eyes off the paper. "Do you know where I can find a hotel around here? My GPS died, and I'm without signal." The man glanced at me quickly and shook his head. "There's nothing around here. The closest one is about 2 hours away. Better keep going." I felt a discomfort in the way he said that. There was something strange in his tone. It was like he was trying to tell me something without actually saying it. I filled up the car and paid. When I left, I noticed there was now another vehicle in the parking lot. A black sedan, parked a little further away, almost out of the light's reach. I hadn't seen it arrive. I didn't think much of it. I got in the car, started the engine, and headed back onto the road. 5 minutes later, I noticed the sedan's headlights in my rearview mirror. I tried not to pay attention. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but as I drove, I realized he was keeping the same distance. If I sped up, he sped up. If I slowed down, he slowed down too. My heart started to race. I decided to test it. I signaled to make a right turn. The sedan didn't signal, but when I made the turn, it followed the same path. This wasn't a coincidence. My stomach churned. I was alone, no signal, driving on a deserted road with a stranger following me. I needed a plan. Ahead, I saw a side road that led to a dirt path. Without thinking, I quickly turned the wheel and entered it, accelerating hard. Dust flew up behind me. The road was bumpy and full of holes, but I kept going, hoping to lose whoever that driver was. The headlights disappeared from the rearview mirror. I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe he gave up. Then I saw something that froze my blood. A few meters away, stopped in the middle of the road, were two men. They were standing a little apart from each other, staring at my approaching car. No flashlights, no reflective vests, just two motionless silhouettes, waiting. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded a little before stopping. The silence was overwhelming. The two men didn't move. They just stood there, staring at me, blocking the road. I tried to think rationally. Maybe they were just locals. Maybe they had a problem and needed help. But everything inside me screamed that something was wrong. I wanted to reverse and turn back, but what if the sedan was still behind me? That's when one of the men started to walk slowly toward me, and the other disappeared into the darkness. My fingers trembled on the steering wheel. The man in front of me kept approaching, slow and calculated steps. The other just vanished into the darkness. What should I do? Reverse, risking running into the car following me? Speed up toward him? My options were terrible. I rolled the window down just enough for my voice to come through. Is everything okay there? No response. The man stopped a few meters from the hood. Now, under the weak headlights, I could see him better. Dark, dirty clothes, a thin face, and eyes locked on me. But what really chilled me was what he was holding in his right hand, a thick piece of metal chain. Suddenly, a sharp noise, something hitting the side of the car. My heart skipped a beat. The other guy, I turned the key, slamming my foot down on the accelerator. The engine roared, but before I could move forward, a shadow lunged at the passenger window. A brutal bang on the glass. My reflex was to turn my face, expecting it to shatter. It didn't break, but it cracked. The man in front moved in an unexpected way. He raised the chain and swung it, throwing it at the windshield. The impact was like thunder inside the car, and the cracks spread across the glass. I was being hunted. I shifted into reverse and floored it. The car jolted and started to roll back. That's when I saw in the rearview mirror the headlights of the sedan. It was there. I didn't have time anymore. I did the only thing I could. I jerked the wheel hard to the left and pressed the accelerator. The car spun on the asphalt and skidded off the road, coming to a stop on the edge of the woods. The engine almost died, but I kept pressing the pedal. The smell of burnt rubber filled the air as the back of the car scraped against the dry earth. The two men ran into the middle of the road. The sedan advanced. My only chance was to get back to the main road. I twisted the wheel and forced the car forward. It screeched its tires and slid back onto the asphalt, throwing dust and rocks behind it. The sedan's headlights grew in the rear view. It was coming at full speed. I floored it. The next minutes were a blur of speed and desperation. The speedometer climbed to 60, then 70, then 80. The road was uneven, and I could barely keep the car straight. The sedan stayed behind me, never flashing its lights, never honking, just following me like a predator waiting for the right moment. Then, up ahead, I saw something that made my chest tighten. A crossroad and a sign indicating the main highway was 2 kilometers away. If I could get there, maybe there would be some traffic, maybe I'd find a truck, a highway patrol, anything, but the sedan accelerated even more. It was closing in fast. Then, something unexpected happened. Blue and red lights flashed on the horizon. A police car. I didn't think. I turned on the hazard lights, honking like a madman as I approached the intersection. The sedan slammed on its brakes behind me. For a second, I looked in the rear view and saw the silhouette of someone inside the car, motionless, just watching me. The police car made a U-turn and came toward me. When I stopped, my chest was rising and falling like I had run miles. A tall, strong officer got out of the car. "Are you all right, sir?" I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. I pointed behind me. That car, they were following me. They tried to catch me. The officer turned around. The sedan was still there. But at the exact moment he pulled out the radio to call for backup, the taillights lit up and the car vanished into the night. I never knew who those men were or what they wanted. Robbery? Kidnapping? Something worse? I never took that route again at night. But sometimes when I'm driving alone, I still look in the rearview mirror, expecting to see those headlights again, and hoping that next time I won't have anywhere to run. I was just an 8-year-old boy when I went through the scariest night of my life. His name was Max, my best friend at the time. He lived in a simple house in a quiet neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado. I remember that Friday after school, I went to sleep at his house. We had plans to spend the night playing video games and eating pizza. Everything seemed normal, usual. Max's family was welcoming. His house had that homemade food smell, and the night started like any other. But I never could have imagined what would happen a few hours later. Max and I decided to sleep in the living room where there was more space and a huge TV. His parents said goodnight and went upstairs along with his older sister. The house soon became immersed in silence, and not long after, Max was already asleep. But I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning inside my sleeping bag, unable to fall asleep. The digital clock flashed a 1:37 a.m. The living room was dark, lit only by the faint light coming from the street. Everything was so quiet that I could hear the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. And then, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of a door opening. It was soft, but clear. A quiet click, followed by a muffled creak. My body froze. That sound didn't come from upstairs, where Max's parents were sleeping. It didn't come from the front door either. I knew exactly where it came from. The garage door. In that instant, my heart started pounding. I knew that house. The garage was at the back, connected to the kitchen by a small pantry. I couldn't see the door from where I was lying, but I knew it was there, just beyond the kitchen, enveloped in darkness. I stayed still, waiting to hear footsteps, voices, anything. But after the sound of the door opening, silence. This was worse. I tried to rationalize. Maybe Max's dad had gone down to get something. But why would he do that without turning on any lights? And why would he open the garage door in the middle of the night? Seconds dragged on like hours. I could feel the weight of the silence crushing me. Then, without warning, a low, muffled noise echoed through the house. Footsteps. Someone was there. The noise was soft, careful, as if the person knew they shouldn't be there. The sound came from the kitchen, very close to the pantry where the garage door was. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was completely dry. That's when I noticed a detail that made my stomach turn with pure terror. If it was Max's dad, why hadn't he turned on any lights? I held my breath and kept listening. The sound stopped for a while, and then I heard a metallic click. The garage door was closed again. And once again, absolute silence. I didn't know what to do. Run, hide, wake up Max? My thoughts were interrupted when I heard something that froze my blood. A whisper, low, hoarse, coming from the kitchen. I couldn't understand the words, but I knew it wasn't in my head. I wasn't dreaming. I wanted to scream, but fear held me down. And then the silence returned. I waited for something, anything, and nothing happened. For long minutes, I stayed there, curled up, listening to my own heart pounding in my chest. The house was completely silent again. No sound, no movement. Maybe, just maybe, I had imagined it all. But I knew I hadn't. Because no one should be in the garage at that time of night, and I was sure someone had opened that door. I stayed there, motionless, every nerve in my body screaming for me to do something. But what? The whisper I heard moments ago still echoed in my head. It was a low, hoarse sound, like someone talking to themselves, or worse, as if they knew I was listening. My first instinct was to wake up Max. But what if someone was still there, hidden in the darkness? What if that person was waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? I held my breath and slowly turned my head toward the kitchen. Nothing. Just shadows. But I felt that something was wrong. I closed my eyes and tried to listen for any noise, any small sign of movement. And then I heard it. The doorknob of the garage door turned. I knew Max and his family locked that door, but that meant someone inside had tried to open it again. My skin crawled all over. I couldn't stay still anymore. I slowly crawled closer to Max and shook his shoulder. Nothing. He was fast asleep. I shook him harder. This time, he mumbled and opened his eyes. "What?" he whispered, groggy. "There's someone in the house." Max blinked a few times, confused. I could see on his face that he didn't believe me, until the doorknob turned again. This time, more forcefully. Max froze. His expression changed instantly. I saw the fear rise in his eyes. And then, a sharp sound, like someone had punched the door. Max jumped out of the sleeping bag and grabbed me by the arm. Like, "We have to call my dad," he whispered. We got up as quietly as possible and started walking toward the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step creaked too loudly in our ears. When we were halfway up the stairs, a metallic, sinister sound echoed through the house, the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. My blood ran cold. Whoever was there had a key. I saw Max's eyes widen. He was about to run to his parents' room, but that's when we heard the click of the door unlocking. The garage door was being opened. My body reacted before my brain could process it. I grabbed Max and we ran up the stairs. When we reached the door to his parents' room, Max knocked desperately. "Dad! Dad! There's someone in the house!" Time seemed to drag on. I could feel the adrenaline burning through my veins. Finally, Max's dad opened the door, confused and groggy. "What the hell are you guys doing?" Before we could answer, a heavy noise came from the kitchen, as if something big had fallen or been knocked over. Max's dad woke up instantly. He ran to the closet and grabbed a baseball bat. Then he rushed down the stairs. We stayed there, frozen at the top of the stairs, waiting. Absolute silence. Then we heard Max's dad's voice. "Who the hell is there?" No answer. He turned on the kitchen lights and approached the garage door. We stepped down a few stairs to see. The garage door was open. Max's dad gripped the baseball bat tightly and entered the garage. The cold of the early morning air rushed into the house. The dim light from the street illuminated the concrete floor. Everything seemed normal, until he suddenly stopped. "Shit," he muttered, staring fixedly at something on the floor. We stepped down a few more stairs and tried to see what it was. On the garage floor, right next to the door, was a key that didn't belong to Max's house. And beside it, a butcher's knife. No one said anything. Max's dad looked around the garage, went out to the street, and checked the surroundings. But whoever had been there had disappeared. He locked the door, checked all the windows, and told Max and me to go back to sleep. But how could we sleep after that? The next morning, Max's dad checked the garage door lock. It hadn't been forced, which meant someone had a key. A week later, Max called me. His family had changed all the locks and installed a security system. He told me his dad was acting strange, pensive. Then, finally, Max's dad revealed something that sent chills down my spine. That same year, they had changed the garage door lock, but the locksmith who did the job had never asked for the old key back. We never found out who entered that house that night, and to this day I wonder if we hadn't woken up, what would have happened to us? Now that you've heard what no one should, remember, the terror doesn't end here. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to check out the next video playing on the screen, if you dare.